Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to Secrets to Recovery Live. My guest in the studio today is Alison Tulloch. Hi, Alison. And in today's interview, we're going to talk about Alison's journey to recovery with ME chronic fatigue. As you may have seen if you saw the description of the interview, Alison had ME for 20 years. And one of the questions we sometimes get asked by people is, well, how about people that have suffered from the illness for a long time? You know, we've had some stories on Secrets to Recovery, people being 18 months, some 5. It's great to have someone that's had, not great for you obviously, Alison, but great in terms of just showing the different experiences that people have. So in tonight's interview, we're going to explore Alison's journey, the things that helped, maybe some of the things that didn't help, and really just reflect back on what life is like now on the other side of having ME chronic fatigue. So firstly, Alison, thank you for being here and being willing to share your story. I know it's been quite a story. We had a little chat on the phone a couple of weeks ago about it. Maybe just as a starting point, how did you know that something wasn't right? What was the first sign that you were having symptoms or?
Well, it was 20 years ago. I'd gone back to nursing. I was a paediatric nurse, and my children were of an age where I could escape a bit, so went back to nursing. And within about a month of actually getting my first post, I'd managed to have a needle stick injury, which meant I had to have a Hep B booster.
It would have been hugely stressful.
I imagine, I managed to get sinusitis, which just wouldn't go away. I had antibiotics after antibiotics. I had Stematol and things to stop the dizziness, and the symptoms just didn't go at all. And bearing in mind, I was terrified going back on the wards after 11 years out. So, 11-year career break, and I found it really scary going back. So I imagine
also just being a paediatric nurse, just seeing children that are suffering, and it's emotionally has a load that goes with it as well.
It does have an emotional load, yes. I mean, it was a general ward, so it wasn't terrible emotionally, I think, but it was still hard work. I think it always is. And you want to do right by the kids. I think that's the pressure, and that's certainly the pressure I felt. So I was under pressure. I had this bug, which didn't go away, and really those were the first symptoms: the dizziness, feeling like I was blacking out. Then it moved on to muscle weakness in my legs. Had a GP who I subsequently found out didn't believe that chronic fatigue or ME existed at all. Which made it difficult, but she did send me for MRIs of my brain and sinus x-rays and
And how was that at the time? You obviously knew that something was going on that was not right. Did your mind jump to kind of various conclusions, or you were just trying to survive day to day?
I think I was just trying to survive, and I think it all merged into my diagnosis with type 1 diabetes, which was only 8 months after I got sick.
Wow.
So that whole year was really a blur of stresses, major stresses, and not feeling well, and not really understanding, and keep going back to the doctors and her saying, well, what do you want me to do? And I say, well, I want you to make me well.
Right.
And really, it hadn't dawned on me that all the sinus and head symptoms could be chronic fatigue at that stage, I think.
Had you known anyone? I mean, we're talking 20 years ago, so we're talking in the mid-90s, and it's obviously a time where, it's frustrating now in terms of lack of understanding of ME chronic fatigue, but it was actually back then that I was first diagnosed, and there really was a huge amount of lack of just even very basic awareness around it.
Yeah, I don't think I had a lot of awareness, and I don't think I really knew anybody who suffered with it. Not immediately. I think within the next 2 or 3 years I came across people, and I subsequently changed GPs, and in fact I changed to a GP whose daughter had been chronically sick with chronic fatigue, and he did a whole raft of tests and diagnosed me formally and started me on amitriptyline and suggested counselling, which I went, why do I need counselling?
Yeah, well, I know.
Physically sick.
I mean, obviously, I know where the story came to. You've kind of come full circle with the whole counselling thing. But at that time, was it a kind of outright no, or was it just why are you suggesting counselling? I've got a physical illness.
Yeah, it was 5 years in when I changed GP, and I knew that I was low because of my physical symptoms. I knew I was low because I was never well. And I knew sometimes I could do with antidepressants really because I was that low. But I just kept saying, well, why do I need counselling? What do I need counselling for? And I obviously didn't understand counselling very well. And I obviously didn't understand the impact of the pressure that I was under on my physical body either.
Sure. I guess you didn't have a reference point for it at that point. You just treated your body like it's a machine and you just expected it to function as it needed to.
Yeah, I was just trying to put one foot in front of the other, trying to cope, in and out of jobs. Really, it was just hard work. So I took the amitriptyline, which did seem to help a bit for a while.
And what was the next point that?
I started getting worse. The more I pushed myself, the more I pushed myself job-wise. I ended up coming up to London. I was commuting. I was doing long days in a much more stressful paediatric nursing environment.
Yes.
And I loved the work, but I would just hit a wall every so often. And when I hit a wall, it took me months to get back to work, do a phased return, be all right for a while, and then hit another wall.
And at the time, did it cross your mind that you would just stop pushing yourself with work, that you would have a phased return and you'd think, well, maybe I need to do something less demanding or less stressful? Was that kind of achiever pattern so innate that there was just a sense of, this is the life that I want and this is what I need to do?
I was obviously quite driven.
Yeah.
Because I did it for a long time.
Yeah.
I did it for about 10, 12 years until I realised I couldn't do it anymore.
And in that 10 or 12 years, how much of the time were you able to function, quote unquote, normally, or?
I was never completely bedridden. I think my symptoms were exhaustion, this sense of my legs just not working.
Yes.
And that could happen if we were on holiday. I mean, we could go on holiday, walk, and I'd get halfway and go, my legs won't work.
Wow.
And sit down, and that would be it. And have to wait for them to kind of have enough energy to be able to get back to the cottage or whatever. But, and also all the head symptoms were still distressing. I found driving difficult. I found noise difficult. I found visual things difficult. I couldn't cope with certain floorings because I just feel like I was spinning out of control. And I would in fact I putting my head back as if I was trying to drain my sinuses all the time. That was a kind of constant thing. I'd sit in the car with my head tilted back with this kind of feeling like I just want to do something with my sinuses. So that was so the head things were a big thing.
Yes.
And emotionally I wasn't good, but I didn't realise how bad I was.
Because you didn't have a language for it, you weren't in touch with it, or it sounds like a lot of the time as well, you were just kind of in a survival mode, like you were just trying to kind of get through each day and recover from each relapse. And
yeah, I think I was in survival mode, and I think I was so blind to the impact of fear and anxiety on my health. I think that's the thing I look back on now, and I think I just didn't realise what an impact that was having over years and years and years of it. And now I understand more. I look back and I think, oh gosh, why did you let that go on? Why did you live like that for so long?
But I think, I'm sure I know you answered probably your own question in a sense, but I think part of the reason why we do that is it's like we don't know how else to be.
Yeah.
It's like that's our identity, that's who we are, that's the person that we know ourselves as our family know us, our friends know us as, and it's like we just have to keep being that person until something happens. But it's like we have no choice but to kind of see it a different way. So we're 10, 12 years in, I guess, at this point, and you've kind of had a number of kind of relapses and gradual kind of recoveries. Had amitriptyline helped a little bit, but perhaps in some ways it almost masked the symptoms, that it's kind of you've been able to keep pushing yourself, although it totally can really have its place for some people. Was there any treatments that you used in that time? How did you explain to yourself what was happening? Did you get a diagnosis?
Apart from the diagnosis I had after 5 years, nothing after that.
Right. Okay.
Nothing at all. I just kept driving and driving and driving. And it wasn't until I stopped nursing and actually had time to think about things and to really start processing it. I think I gave up my last nursing job and let my registration lapse deliberately so I couldn't go back.
You kind of like the Vikings, you kind of burnt the boat.
Yeah,
So
I did. I deliberately
return,
burnt the boat. And I found really difficult because I
Sure.
didn't want to do that. But I knew I was never going to get well. So by that time I'd got to some understanding that this was not good.
Right.
I'd started to do a bit of research, worked out that probably I had issues with mitochondrial function. Read a lot of gooky stuff that I couldn't make head nor tail of, didn't really know. And we're still talking, 8, 9, 10 years ago,
Yes.
I guess.
Yes.
And came across things that I thought, well, is it my fillings? Is it my amalgam fillings reacting with my gold fillings? Is it this? Is it that? Where do I start? Which bit do I start with? So I started by calming down a bit, I think. That was probably the thing, physically and...
And just, I want to come back in a moment a bit more to the kind of treatments, but just that point that you gave up nursing, I mean, obviously that was, as you mentioned, like a big thing. What was different at that time? Why was that possible then and it wasn't possible before? Like, what supported you in reaching that point of going, I have to prioritize myself and my recovery over anything else?
I don't think anything dramatically had changed. Our financial situation hadn't altered an awful lot. I did put pressure on everybody by stopping my job. But I think I realised I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, you reached a point of just
no
more.
I reached a point where I couldn't do it. And I started to understand a bit more about perfectionism and performance orientation. That was a big revelation to me.
So you could see a little bit of what you were doing.
Yeah.
And I guess you discovered that if it was possible to push your way to recovery, you would have been there.
Yeah.
So perhaps there was also a sense of like, this strategy just isn't going to work.
Think you put your finger on it. I think that's right. I think I just had got to a point where it hadn't worked. Keep pushing it, keep doing phased returns, keep changing jobs so that they were slightly more sedentary or whatever. It still didn't work. And I was still emotionally knee-jerking. I think, my last nursing job, I didn't leave it in a great way. And
so you were still trying to prove to yourself somehow that...
I couldn't handle criticism.
Okay.
I think that was the biggie. And I think that was one of the things that brought me up sharp. That I'd felt emotionally reactive for a long while, but that was the last straw, really.
Yes.
As if I can't even deal with that appropriately. When I've got the gifting to do the job, but actually I'm not dealing with it emotionally. I'd never feel well. That's obviously not helping, but there's something else adrift as well in there. And I think the penny was starting to drop, that this wasn't just a physical disease. That helped.
Yes.
There was a knock-on from the sinusitis.
Yeah.
There were other things going on.
Sure. So you reached the point that you started to look more at the physical side and you were coming across the kind of plethora of different options and treatments. What was that like? Was there a point of you kind of just touched on it a moment ago, kind of overwhelm of like where do I go? Like how was that?
It was confusing.
Yes.
I think that was the main thing. I didn't know which bit to start with, and I didn't have loads of money to start unpacking every single avenue that I came across.
Yeah, you couldn't afford to just throw money at it and try everything.
No,
right?
and also I didn't feel that I came across many things that really had much authority behind them, in terms of giving me the confidence that this was worth trying. So what if I just went off down that avenue and it really didn't achieve anything? Or another, so I didn't do anything. Really. It was just, I printed off loads of stuff and then just left it in a cupboard.
But you did start to give yourself more rest, and you did start to take it.
And I did start to read.
Yes.
And I did start to understand a lot more about how I worked.
Yes.
And I think that was the first big breakthrough, really.
And was that difficult? Was it a relief? Was it because it can go both ways. It can be a sense of like it's a relief to like finally stop pushing, but it can also be challenging because you haven't got the distractions of kind of work and life and that kind of thing, and you're actually left having to really face yourself and the situation.
It was hard. Yeah, I was thinking earlier today, actually, I hardly ever cry now. I must have cried nearly all the time then. Yeah. I think, you look back and think, gosh, yeah, I cried a lot. it was difficult.
Yeah.
It was a difficult time. I mean, I did do things. I started a little fair trade company because I can't do nothing. That's the trouble. I'm dreadful.
There's not any achiever patterns or anything
No,
going on
not
here.
at all,
No. Okay.
No, I'm in complete denial. No.
Well, not complete denial, because clearly enough resolution to get to recovery,
Not
which is all that's
completely.
necessary.
But I did do some things, but I had enough time and much less pressure.
Yes. Okay.
And I think, it was difficult. I think it was difficult emotionally to face some of the things, but also it was a relief when you read a chapter in a book and you go, that's me.
Right.
Oh, gosh, I can't believe I've been like that and I've been so thick.
There's a little bit of inner critic going on there, I noticed.
There's a bit of inner critic. But I think that's something I might talk about later. I don't know, that sense of forgiving yourself, I think you have to
Totally.
come to that place of
Well,
forgiving
that's the thing,
yourself.
it's like it's so easy with the kind of the wisdom that comes, especially from hindsight, and where you can look back and you go, wow, I can see that there was perfectionism, there was the achiever, there was all this anxiety, there was denial about recognizing what's going on. But at the time, it's like we're always doing our best, you know, and we're actually suffering more in those patterns, not less. So if we need to beat ourselves up, we've had the pain.
Yeah.
It's like there's no need to give more.
That's
you know?
right. No, that's true.
So at what point did you start to actively more engage in treatment beyond kind of reading and noticing the patterns, or did that phase last quite a while of just kind of almost self-supporting? And
I think a couple of years it was me doing a lot of the work and me thinking, oh, I'm getting there, but actually I wasn't changing much physically.
Okay. And were there particular books you read that you want to mention?
No, there was nothing. There were just bits I came across that kind of just made me open my eyes. They weren't. I don't know that they'd be particularly helpful for anybody else.
They were just things that
just
spoke
one of
to you
those
in that
moments.
moment.
One of those little moments that just go, oh wow, light bulb moments. But it probably took me a couple of years, and then I gave up the fair trade company, and at that point I was really low because I realised I'd lost hope in a way of ever being well. And although I felt as if I'd been trying to work towards that, I hadn't managed it.
Yes.
And although I'd started to make a little bit of inroads emotionally, I still wasn't there. I was still quite reactive, and I still knew I wasn't right. And that's when I thought, it was a friend from New Zealand, actually. She'd gone back to New Zealand, and she'd also got chronic fatigue, and they'd found that she'd got mercury poisoning. Mm-hmm. So she was doing chelation. Mm-hmm. And she happened to come back, and we met at a barbecue, and that was the trigger, actually. Seeing her, I thought I need to go back to the drawing board. So
because you saw someone that had found an intervention that for them had made a difference.
Well, it hadn't made a difference yet, but she'd found an intervention that she was
Had hope.
pursuing
Yes.
that gave her hope,
Yeah.
and I realised how. It was through that really that I realised how hopeless I felt. That I really had lost hope. That it had been, by that time, 18 years, and I'd had enough, really.
Yeah. Understandably so.
So I went back onto the internet and came across, for the first time, Optimum Health Clinic. And when I read your kind of strategy for treatment, it was amazing. I just looked at it and thought, this brings all these things together. It just made so much sense. So I had my 15-minute chats, and I came up October before last, so 18 months ago I came up for my...
And when you, at that point, where because I think you certainly made some progress in the years prior to that in terms of, I think, am I right in saying, in terms of how you'd been self-managing better and support? So where were you, would you say, at that point?
I'd started my first year counselling training.
Okay.
Yes, I forgot that bit. It's quite key, really. About a year before that, I thought I was handling my son's diabetes okay, and then something happened. I took him somewhere and lost him, and he was an adult, so this is not a toddler we're talking about. This is an adult.
But it was still emotionally.
I had a complete meltdown. I was absolutely beside myself. I couldn't believe my reaction. I was dreadful, absolutely dreadful. And I happened to have a checkup with my GP about blood pressure, which had been sky high for a long time,
right,
due to what I was putting myself through, I think. And I was on 2 medications for blood pressure at that point. And I said, this is what happened yesterday. I can't live like this anymore. And she said, I really think you need some counselling. So she said, I'll send you for CBT. And I went, okay.
Was there a difference in your reaction then? So what there had been?
Yeah, I was desperate.
Yeah. Okay.
I realised I had that situation with Ross had made me realise how completely terrified. I think I lived expecting him to die all the time. And I carried that with me all the time, every minute of every day.
So it's almost like your desperation was greater than your cynicism, or your kind of, there was like enough, like, I have no choice.
This has to change. I realised I couldn't live like it. It was such an irrational reaction. I thought, I can't live like this. So she referred me for CBT, and it was a phone CBT. And after the second session, I said, I have got so many coping strategies. I have coped for 18 years. I don't need any more coping strategies. This is not going to work. So I then talked to a friend who runs a counselling agency, and she local counsellors and pointed out one that she thought might suit me because she knows what I'm like. And I phoned this lady and saw her for 6 months, and she was absolutely brilliant. And I have such respect for her. I had such respect that I started counselling training because
that's about the biggest compliment you can give her.
It was massive. Yeah, she taught me such a lot. But she listened. I think being able to really talk for the first time and have someone really listen was amazing. But
especially when it sounds like you got used to not really listening to yourself in terms of being quite hard on yourself and pushing yourself, that it was kind of modelling the kind of support and softness that you needed to learn.
She was kind to me.
Yeah.
She was really kind to me. But she also challenged me to get back in touch with my creative side. She challenged me in terms of meditation and mindfulness and things like that. So I started to make some inroad. And then after I'd had that 6 months with her, I still was physically sick, and that's what I was getting low about after that time, because I'd had this time where it felt very affirming. It was a really good time. I'd learnt a lot about myself, but I was still sick. And it was like everybody was saying, well, you should be sorted now, because after all, ME is just in the head, isn't it?
Right, and you'd explored some of the emotional side.
Yeah, so now you've sorted the emotional side, you should be all right.
That must have been quite annoying to I imagine. Put myself in your shoes and think that's like.
So that was really difficult, and then that's why I got so low. I think after the counselling, that
because you'd engaged with that work.
I engaged. I'd done it for goodness sake. I'd accepted that I needed it.
Yeah.
I'd embraced it. I'd run with it as I do with most things. I'd picked it up and done research and done it to the nth degree, and but I was still physically sick.
Yeah.
And not getting any better at all. So started the counselling training, and I think the self-awareness, the journaling and things like that, and really having to face things at even a deeper level again was really good for me. But I was still sick.
Yes.
When I found.
So that's right. Yeah. So you Googled the Optimum Health Clinic and you had your 15-minute chats, and then
I must have come across it on an advert on somebody else's page, because I didn't Google Optimum Health Clinic. I'd never heard of Optimum Health Clinic. But it's one of those moments you look back and you think, how did I find it?
Yeah. It's like when you're in a bookshop and a book literally leaps off the shelf and hits you in the head, and you go, I think I should buy that book.
Yeah, it was one of those moments, and I don't know how it happened, but it happened.
Yes. So you came to the 90-day program, is that right?
Yep.
Initially, and you had an in-person appointment with Leslie on the nutrition side.
I did.
And
during those 3 days.
Just talk us through how it was. I mean, what your reaction was. Was there a sense that you said when you saw the information pack, there was a sense of kind of like, this makes so much sense. Was it just a smooth journey from there? Normally, it's a bit bumpier than that. I'm curious as to how it unfolded.
I think I was very positive about it. I had some concerns.
Yes.
Which I think is probably quite natural. But I found the 15-minute chats really, really good at putting my mind at rest.
Yes.
And I thought, they're not all complete fruitcakes. This might be worth a
just some
shot.
Of us.
Yeah. So I was pretty positive about coming up here, but I think looking back, I think I was probably still quite strung up about it. I was probably quite anxious about it, but I found it a really positive time, and I was quite happy to enter into Joe was the person who led our 3 days, and I found some of it quite helpful. And it was really good to meet the others as well and to share experiences. And I thought, it was a very positive 3 days. So no, it wasn't particularly bumpy, apart from the fact that I still was the opposite of chilled. Really.
Yeah, you were still running the patterns. And so you started working with the tools and the various things, especially because it sounds like you had a lot of awareness at this point, and you started to work in some of the bigger parts of the patterns.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you hadn't yet really calmed down your nervous system.
No.
So I'm wondering how that process was from there.
I don't know what was said because I can't actually remember but I remember going home for my 3 days, and I'd cleared my calendar, which is very unlike me. But I'd completely cleared my calendar, and I sit for a couple of weeks, and I said, right, I am calming my nervous system down.
That same will that, in a sense, had been the source of pushing too hard was then applied to actually committing to calm things down.
I was absolutely going to calm my nervous system down. And I didn't watch television. I listened to music, which I rarely do, actually, these days. But I listened to music. I breathed. I consciously sat and breathed a lot for that 2 weeks. And I could feel myself just going, just calming down. And then when I then started to do things again, I started to have problems. How do you
maintain that calm state while you're doing things?
And I think, in fact, Leslie sent me the pacing document, which was really helpful. And then I got hold of a piece of paper and I did a grid, and I had every day, I had lots of slots for every day, and I worked out what was depleting and what was positive, and for all the different areas of my life. And I was only allowed to have a certain amount. I had to balance every day with all these different things. So I then had my grid for the week, and I had to stick with my grid for the week.
And sorry, go on.
Just to get me into the habit of thinking about, is that depleting, or is it actually building you up? Are you getting a balance in the day? And after I'd done that for a couple of weeks, I found I could do it a little bit more naturally.
And I always find it really fascinating when people go from having certain personalities that are causing them to push themselves and drive themselves, and then actually those same qualities that have caused them to get sick, used in a positive way, actually can become part of the source of recovery. So that kind of focusing on kind of detail and kind of, really putting your focus on it actually sounds like it was a really helpful thing, done in that way.
It was, yeah. And I think, and with the self-awareness, the increased self-awareness, I think you realise when you just have to, just don't take it quite so, you don't have to finish everything on that list for today.
Yeah.
If you don't have time, it doesn't matter. It's okay. Just go with it, it's not a problem. Yeah. So I think learning to recognise that you don't have to finish your list of things to do. Even if that's a good thing, you don't have to do it. It's okay.
It's when you get it, it's life-changing, but it can be really hard to see that. So, and talk us through on the nutrition side. So you saw Leslie in person initially, and I think you worked with her by phone and by Skype from there. How was that journey for you?
Well, it's been an amazing journey. Started off, I think, immediately gluten-free and reducing sugar and refined sugars and processed food, which of course I embraced wholeheartedly, as is my wont. And I did start to feel better. I had mitochondrial testing, which was low, and various other tests, and started to see a little bit of improvement. And of course, by January, I came in October, and by January I decided I was well.
Oh, right. Oh, good. Okay.
That was it. I was better. Okay. And that was that. So, life could get back to normal, and I could start cramming everything in again, and I could start eating what I wanted. And
old habits die hard.
That didn't go well.
Yeah. So what does that? I'm curious, because I think that's not an uncommon thing to do. That it's like someone's been ill for a long time, they figure it out. Right, all good. What happened?
I was still getting delayed fatigue, but I was in denial for a little while.
Okay. But then you obviously you recognised it, and you.
Yeah, with Leslie's help and probably Joe in there as well, and Joe was still giving me some input and some useful tools as well along the way. So that was really good. So I continued with that. I did change my diet radically, obviously. And although I had a bit of a blip when I thought I was well, I went back to pretty much doing that. Drinking a lot of water and doing moderate exercise and that sort of thing. And we kind of went through till about May. But Leslie felt I wasn't making as much progress as she thought I should be, considering the effort I put into it. And I still had all my head symptoms.
Okay. I mean, all the sinus symptoms you're having.
Yeah, I still had the headaches and the dizziness and the feeling like I was wanting to tilt my head back and the occasional feeling like I was blacking out and the eyes and the ears and all this stuff. And so she suggested it might be worth looking at neurotoxins. So I did the online test, which came out positive. And now that was I was really sceptical about that.
Okay.
Weird. Oh no, I've read the blurb.
Yeah, and I guess also interesting as well with your kind of nursing kind of background that some of these things which are not necessarily looked at through the traditional kind of medical kind of perspectives, and yet, so you, I guess by this point though, you've been able to suspend your cynicism or your kind of skepticism enough that you would be willing to kind of look at it and explore it.
Yeah, I think I'd moved from my Western medicine approach fairly dramatically by then, and I was prepared to look at it. So I did, and then when that came back, I went completely grain, legume free, and virtually paleo, really.
And I was going to ask, was that a difficult change to make? But I'm guessing by this point you made so many other difficult changes that it was just another step in the process.
Yeah, it wasn't a massive step.
Yeah.
I think because of I was getting used to I always cooked a lot anyway, but getting used to the no processed food had been it is quite hard work, I think. And when you want to stick with it all the time and not have a day off, the pressure of that is interesting.
Sure.
The fact you can't grab a pizza out of the freezer. And,
you have a lot more planning and organising.
Yeah, you've got a lot. So a huge investment in terms of time, really, getting on top of that. But I responded to it.
And how quickly did you notice a change with doing it?
Started to improve after about a couple of months, but it was 5 months before I was completely clear. Did the neurotoxin test 3 times, and some of that was, I think, gut related. Guts having come off all grain. It's a little challenge, but
yeah, sure. At the end of that 5 months, so you say that it was the head symptoms. How was that different after 5 months?
They'd gone
completely. Wow.
We went to IKEA last week. The first time I've been since I got better.
It's a pretty good test of anyone.
And we were walking around, and I went, "I'm well. The lights don't affect me," because I couldn't cope with lighting in lots of places. Supermarkets couldn't handle the lighting at all, and I could walk around IKEA all day, all weekend, and I'd be fine. I came home, didn't feel tired, no head symptoms, nothing. So that was the difference. It was absolutely massive.
Wow.
And my mitochondrial function, it was improving quicker too.
Yes.
So February, the test was back
and this
up
is
to
last
normal.
year we're talking? Or
No,
this year.
This year.
Yeah.
So it was November. Yeah, November. I did the last neurotoxin test that was clear.
Yes.
And then I stayed on the diet. I haven't really deviated. I've tried a bit of white rice, reasonable, but pretty much I've stayed with it.
And what's IKEA was a great example in terms of how you feel in your body day to day. What's that after 20 years of some level of symptoms and kind of constantly relapsing, and what was that like?
I have my life back. It's that dramatic, really. Not having delayed fatigue, not having the dizziness and all those symptoms. But also, I think I feel calm. I just feel at peace, chilled. And I've never been a particularly chilled person. I've always been. But even though I'm busy now, I'm doing lots of things. I still, within that, I just feel calm. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is that emotionally I am well. alongside the fact that I have energy, I can get up every day, even if I haven't slept well. I
Yes.
can get up and function. And in fact, the last few weeks, I started saying, this is really weird. How do you live like this?
Okay.
You know? So I've got this kind of transition to make to how you live feeling this calm
Yeah.
and this normal. Well, I presume it's normal. I don't know, because I haven't been normal for a long time. And when I started looking back, you know, even before the ME started, I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear before that.
And of
So,
course, as I know, you know, we normalise to a certain level, and so we have people come in and their whole nervous system is totally adrenalised.
Yeah.
And we play. You know, I noticed that you seem that there's a lot of kind of, you know, wired energy. So no, I'm completely fine, and they're so normal, and it's only when we calm down that we go, oh my God, I was so wired. But it's like it's really hard to see it when we're in it. It's only really the contrast that shows us the change.
It is true. I just didn't realise how much I lived on that hyper alert state all the time.
Yeah.
And now I don't.
Yeah.
And my response to be different.
This is your diabetic sign, yeah.
Very, very different. And my life is just really different. I cope with things in a very different way. I feel healthy. I have energy.
Well, there's also kind of physically, you look very different. You were showing us a photo earlier.
I've lost 4 stone. I forgot that.
So the photo that we're going to show, when was that photo? Do you remember that photo?
That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, so it's just kind of come up on the screen there.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
But I mean, it's a pretty remarkable difference. And, you know, in a sense, you know, we could say that, you know, that's just aesthetic. Of course, you know, that's one measure. I think the more important measure, of course, is how you feel inside of yourself. I think that's the thing that's really kind of fundamental. Say a bit about life now. You kind of alluded to the fact that you're now training as a counsellor, and it's kind of interesting. We get to go full circle to 20 years ago. It was like, I don't need counselling, and then it's something that, you know, in the course of the sessions you're having with this woman that obviously really inspired you. It's like it's now become a whole new direction. So say a bit about that and what it's like to be doing that for you.
It's been a really good journey, actually. I've learned a lot, and I don't know how much I will use it in the future. Tomorrow is my last session of the level 3 counselling certificate, so I'll finish tomorrow. I've got one more piece of work to do. But I know it's really impacted how I relate with people and how I listen and support, and I do pastoral care stuff locally. So there's an element of me using it in that and being able to, to listen. And I think learning not to be a fixer, taking that pressure off.
And it's really interesting you say that, given that you're doing training in a field which is taking care of others, but you can see the difference between being in a role of caring and supporting, but not taking responsibility for other people's things.
Yeah.
And that's a really important insight.
Yeah, and I think I've learnt probably the hard way that in the end we learn by our own revelation. We change by our own revelation that we get inside us. You can't put that on somebody. You can't say to them, well, you know that. You can't say to them, do this, do that, and everything will be all right. Because they've got to really understand in themselves that that's what they need to do.
Well, as you experience in your own journey, it's not just getting it as an idea, it's getting it as your lived experience.
Yeah.
And someone can understand the importance of calming down. They can understand even what to do. But the actual lived experience of doing that is just a different. It's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. People sometimes say knowledge is to know something as an idea, and wisdom is actually to be able to really live it.
Yeah. So that's, and I think I will use that training a lot in the future. Even though I'm thinking now about going into the nutrition side as well, the functional medicine
when we
nutrition
spoke
side.
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, because
we'll blame that one on Leslie, shall we?
We will. We'll blame that on Leslie. Yeah.
Okay.
Although she didn't know about it, I rang her. Did you go to this college?
And I'm just curious also is your kind of your wider life, like what that's like now, especially with the contrast of all those years.
What's it like now? Well, I think when I first realised I was well, it was like my life had been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think when I got to that point of feeling like I'd lost hope, it was because I felt my life was getting smaller and I was getting less able, I was getting fatter. And what was the future for me? Ill health into old age.
Yeah, there's nothing to feel excited about, yeah.
Well, I don't know about excited. It was just so depressing, that life getting so narrow and so small. And I think when I realised, when I got my results and my mitochondria were functioning again and my head symptoms had all gone and I just felt well and vibrant and I can run and walk fast, and it was like the world just opened up. It was literally the opposite. It was like suddenly the world is my oyster. Yeah, I might be 54, but so what? You know, I've got a future. I've got years ahead of me where I can enjoy my own life, but input into others as well. And hopefully my experience will be something that other people will be able to be inspired by as well, which is why I suggest to do this, because I think, you know, it was such a long haul for me to find this clinic and to get that all-round care, that holistic approach, which was what I needed.
Right.
And yeah, so I'm passionate about other people finding that much earlier than I did.
And I'm curious along those lines, as you're sat here now, you think about that you 20 years ago that was just beginning this, what's obviously been a long and very challenging journey. What would you say to that you? And maybe that you then, but also maybe that you kind of 8 years ago who kind of reached that kind of real turning point, I have to do something about this.
I think I should have listened to the GP that diagnosed me, which was 15 years ago. And when he said, why don't you have some counselling, I probably should have had some counselling then.
Right.
I didn't understand. And maybe I should have said, why? Why do you think I need counselling? And maybe he then would have said, you're stressed out of your head. That's what counselling's for. And maybe I would have understood that. I don't know. But I didn't even ask the question because I was closed because I was physically sick and I wasn't.
Which you were.
Which I was.
And interestingly, as you work with the psychology side, that for you, that wasn't enough. Some people it can be, and for you it wasn't. But it was definitely a factor that helped you. I think there's probably also something in there around, I think the counselling helped you reach a point of acceptance that then allowed you to look at it more from a physical perspective. I think prior to that, there was a sense of denial that I think that when we get in these kind of relapse patterns, that's often what's happening, that we don't want to look at the physical side of the reality of what's happening. We just keep on thinking, if I just, this time it'll be okay. And sometimes we have to do some work to reach the point that we can really accept that there's something that's going on that's of course undeniable, yet it's amazing how psychologically we can be in denial about something which is kind of undeniable. If that makes any sense.
Yes, no, I do understand that. I think, try and be open. I think I wish I had been more open. And I think when I had misgiving or I had queries about the clinic, I think I'm really glad that I was prepared to be open and to take a risk. And to be bold in that, and to take that risk. I think that was really important. Well, obviously it was pivotal,
Sure.
If I hadn't done it. But it is multifactorial. So for me, it was lots of things. It wasn't just one thing or the other. So, and be kind to yourself. I think that some of the things I made a pact with myself not to regret, because you could look at yourself and say, 20 years, what a complete idiot. How did you manage to, be sick for that long? But I'm just not going to regret it. Yeah. Any little thought, I just go, no, I'm just not going there, because I am who I am, and I did what I did, and I did it for good reasons often. And there's nothing I can do about that now. And
what you're describing very beautifully is actually standing up to, you mentioned earlier the inner critic and that kind of voice that has constantly got an assessment and a judgment on who we are and what we should have done and what we shouldn't have done. And it's just,
I'm just not going to do it.
It just feeds more suffering.
Yeah. So forgive yourself. And I think the other thing was forgiving others, people that had hurt me, that I was emotionally going round and round the twist, and just letting it go, really, really learning to let it go, has been really healing as well. So I think they're some of the major things I've learned. Right. And if a diet works, just stick with it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's hard work. It doesn't matter if everybody looks at you like you're really weird, because they do. What, you don't eat any grains? It doesn't matter. If it works for you, then...
And it's interesting that you were saying with the neurotoxins that it took a couple of months to get to the point that you really had the tangible evidence that was making a difference. And it's having that certain determination somehow to reach that point. But as we were saying, and I think this is often the case with people, the very qualities that have been the source of you pushing yourself, doing too much, not listening to your body, did give you that tenacity and that determination. See through things like calming down your nervous system, going on a grain-free diet, and engaging with the various things that you did.
And then you can start doing grain-free baking.
There you go.
Be a crazy person.
What can I say? Alison, that's a pretty good endpoint. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. I know quite a big thing to come on those cameras and there's people watching, but I know people really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you making the time. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for listening.
Brilliant. No, well, it's always really inspiring, and I think I just know how helpful these stories are for people. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. And thank you for watching. If you want to find out more information on the Optimum Health Clinic, you can go to freedomfromme.uk. And if you enjoyed watching Alison's story, there's more stories like this on our YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/freedomfromme. And also secretstorecovery.com has many more inspirational stories and tips and guidance as well. But thank you for watching. We have another Secrets to Recovery live in a month. I think it's the 27th of April, something like that. But we'll certainly let you know nearer the time. But for now, thank you for watching, and good night.